The British attitude toward Gandhi was one of mingled admiration, amusement, bewilderment, suspicion, and resentment. Except for a tiny minority of Christian missionaries and radical socialists, the British tended to see him at best as a utopian visionary and at worst as a cunning hypocrite whose professions of friendship for the British race were a mask for subversion of the British Raj. Gandhi was conscious of the existence of that wall of prejudice, and it was part of the strategy of Satyagraha to penetrate it. His three major campaigns in 1920-22, 1930-34, and 1940-42 were well designed to engender that process of self-doubt and questioning that was to undermine the moral defenses of his adversaries and to contribute, together with the objective realities of the post-war world, to producing the grant of dominion status in 1947. The British abdication in India was the first step in the liquidation of the British Empire on the continents of Asia and Africa. Gandhi's image as a rebel and enemy died hard, but, as it had done to the memory of George Washington, Britain, in 1969, the centenary year of Gandhi's birth, erected a statue to his memory. Gandhi had critics in his own country and indeed in his own party. The liberal leaders protested that he was going too fast, the young radicals complained that he was not going fast enough, left-wing politicians alleged that he was not serious about evicting the British or liquidating such vested Indian interests as princes and landlords. The leaders of the Dalits doubted his good faith as a social reformer, and Muslim leaders accused him of partiality to his own community. Research in the second half of the 20th century established Gandhi's role as a great mediator and reconciler. His talents in that direction were applied to conflicts between the older moderate politicians and the young radicals, the political terrorists and the parliamentarians, the urban intelligentsia and the rural masses, the traditionalists and the modernists, the caste Hindus and the Dalits, the Hindus and the Muslims, and the Indians and the British. It was inevitable that Gandhi's role as a political leader should loom larger in the public imagination, but the mainspring of his life lay in religion, not in politics. And religion for him did not mean formalism, dogma, ritual, or sectarianism. What I have been striving and pining to achieve these 30 years, he wrote in his autobiography, is to see God face to face. His deepest strivings were spiritual, but unlike many of his fellow Indians with such aspirations, he did not retire to a cave in the Himalayas to meditate on the absolute. He carried his cave, as he once said, within him. For him truth was not something to be discovered in the privacy of one's personal life, it had to be upheld in the challenging contexts of social and political life. Gandhi won the affection and loyalty of gifted men and women, old and young, with vastly dissimilar talents and temperaments, of Europeans of every religious persuasion, and of Indians of almost every political line. Few of his political colleagues went all the way with him and accepted non-violence as a creed. Fewer still shared his food fads, his interest in mud packs and nature cure, or his prescription of Brahmacharya, complete renunciation of the pleasures of the flesh. Scholars have continued to judge Gandhi's place in history. He was the catalyst if not the initiator of three of the major revolutions of the 20th century, the movements against colonialism, racism, and violence. He wrote copiously. The collected edition of his writings had reached 100 volumes by the early 21st century. Much of what he wrote was in response to the needs of his co-workers and disciples and the exigencies of the political situation, but on fundamentals he maintained a remarkable consistency, as is evident from the Hind Swaraj, Indian Home Rule, published in South Africa in 1909. The strictures on Western materialism and colonialism, the reservations about industrialism and urbanization, the distrust of the modern state, and the total rejection of violence that was expressed in that book seemed romantic, if not reactionary, to the pre-World War I generation in India and the West, which had not known the shocks of two global wars or experienced the phenomenon of Adolf Hitler and the trauma of the atom bomb. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's objective of promoting a just and egalitarian order at home and non-alignment with military blocs abroad doubtless owed much to Gandhi, but neither he nor his colleagues in the Indian nationalist movement wholly accepted the Gandhian models in politics and economics. In the years since Gandhi's death, his name has been invoked by the organizers of numerous demonstrations and movements. However, with a few outstanding exceptions, such as those of his disciple the land reformer Vinoba Bhave in India and of the civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., in the United States, those movements have been a travesty of the ideas of Gandhi. Yet Gandhi will probably never lack champions. Eric H. Erickson, a distinguished American psychoanalyst, in his study of Gandhi senses an affinity between Gandhi's truth and the insights of modern psychology. One of the greatest admirers of Gandhi was Albert Einstein, who saw in Gandhi's nonviolence a possible antidote to the massive violence unleashed by the fission of the atom. And Gunnar Myrdal, the Swedish economist, after his survey of the socio-economic problems of the underdeveloped world, pronounced Gandhi, in practically all fields, an enlightened liberal. In a time of deepening crisis in the underdeveloped world, of social malaise in the affluent societies, of the shadow of unbridled technology in the precarious peace of nuclear terror, it seems likely that Gandhi's ideas and techniques will become increasingly relevant. Indian independence movement, an anti-colonial struggle spanning approximately a century, aimed at ending British rule over the Indian subcontinent. It ended in a bittersweet victory, as the people of the subcontinent won freedom and independence, yet were painfully divided into two nations, India and Pakistan. Nonetheless, midnight on August 14–15, 1947, was a triumph and a landmark moment in the returning of dignity to the peoples of Asia following the colonial period. The movement was more than political, it was a renaissance, and an inspiration for oppressed nations around the world. Shortly before the stroke of midnight on August 14, India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, made a famous speech entitled, "A Tryst with Destiny." The British first arrived not as conquerors, but as merchants, drawn by India's extraordinary wealth, which had been famous in the West since Greek times. They arrived to find India dominated by the vast Mughal Empire, which had been established in the 16th century by the conqueror Babur and now ruled most of the subcontinent. In 1613, the Mughal Emperor Jahangir granted the British permission to establish a trading post in Surat, Gujarat, which would become the first British foothold in India. Over the following century, the British East India Company established additional trading posts and also gradually increased its economic and political influence throughout the subcontinent. After the death of Emperor Aurangzeb in 1707, the Mughal Empire entered a rapid phase of decline, providing an opening for various regional powers, including the Marathas, the Sikhs, and the northern Rajput chiefs to assert their sovereignty. By the middle of the 18th century, there was no longer a single dominant power in the subcontinent, leaving the region vulnerable to colonial ambitions. The Battle of Plassey in 1757, part of the larger 7 Years' War between Britain and France, was a turning point in the British conquest of India. The East India Company had increasingly solidified its position and was now regarded by native rulers as a serious threat. The Nawab, ruler of Bengal, Siraj al-Dawla, favoring an alliance with the French, had previously attacked company trading posts. With the help of some of the Nawab's own generals, the British were able to defeat and depose the Nawab at the Battle of Plassey and appointed their own administration in Bengal. This crucial victory marked the transformation of the British East India Company from a mere mercantile presence into a military and political power in India. The company would go on to consolidate its power over the Indian subcontinent through a series of military campaigns. It established its dominance in Bengal and Bihar with the Battle of Buxar, 1764, in southern India with Tippu Sultan's defeat in the Fourth Mysore War, 1799, and in the Punjab following the Second Sikh War, 1848–49. Please subscribe to my channel and like, share, comment on the video and don't forget to hit the bell icon for latest updates.